You know that feeling when you sense someone standing behind you? That's exactly how this story begins. Don't turn around, just focus on what you hear. The delivery to nowhere. My name is Chris. This happened years ago, and it's something I actually forgot about until recently. I was 17 that summer, working nights at a pizza place on the outskirts of my childhood hometown. I wasn't thrilled with it, but with no money and 2 parents who would have killed me for being unemployed, I couldn't complain. It was one of those jobs you take because nothing else is hiring. Slow shifts, sticky uniforms, and a beat-up delivery car that barely made it up hills. At least I didn't have to drive my own car. That would have sucked. Oh yeah, not that this is super relevant, but I do want to mention that the pizza was god-awful, like genuinely terrible. I couldn't understand, and honestly still don't understand, why anyone in their right mind would order from that spot. If not for the technology and the relatively nice atmosphere it provided, I honestly don't think we ever would have gotten a single order. That place is definitely the thing I missed the least about my childhood hometown, and that's saying something. The one saving grace about working there was that, because the pizza was so bad, or because the place itself was so far away from downtown, or maybe a combination of both, people rarely ordered from us, so most nights were dead quiet. I'm not going to bore you with the mundane details of how my nights usually went. It was a pizza place. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. One night, I was restocking the fridge with drinks when the tablet buzzed with an online order. A large sausage and olive pizza. I remember that distinctly because we never got olives. The address was out in the middle of nowhere, past the edge of our delivery zone, and I remember getting ready to reject it out of habit. But before I could, my manager, this 30-something guy named Russell, who mostly sat in the back scrolling through Reddit, looked over and told me to take it, saying we hadn't had a single run in over an hour. I didn't argue. When the pizza was ready, I typed in the directions on my phone, grabbed the pie, and figured at least it would kill 30 or 40 minutes. As I was about to leave the store, I looked more carefully at the delivery instructions Russell had printed and stapled to the box, which I hadn't paid attention to until then. They said, and I remember this word for word, "Park on the street behind the house, walk through the backyard, knock on the back door only." That caught my attention, but my 17-year-old brain came up with several rational reasons why someone might not want me to use the front door. Maybe they didn't want to wake an old person or a young child in the house. Maybe the front door was being renovated. Maybe they wanted to hide the delivery from a parent or spouse. It could have been any number of things. Plus, all I could think about was how slow the night was, and how much longer it would feel if I sat around folding boxes. So, I decided to just do my job. But the second I stepped outside, I started having second thoughts. It was one of those summer nights that felt like walking through soup. Hot, humid, and completely still, like even the air was stuck in some kind of invisible jelly. I don't know if this'll make sense, but there's this stale, sour smell you get when it's really humid and still out. Sort of like old plastic and sun-baked dirt. That's what it smelled like out there. I hate that smell more than anything, but it was unavoidable. I had the windows down for maybe 2 minutes before giving up and blasting the AC. The delivery address wasn't in the direction of downtown. It was in the exact opposite direction, even though the pizza place itself was already kind of in the middle of nowhere. The drive was supposed to take just over 25 minutes, but it felt longer because of how empty the roads were. I'm definitely exaggerating a bit. It's not like there were no houses for miles, but it got much less dense the farther I drove. When I finally got to the address, I realized I was coming up behind the house. The GPS had routed me along this skinny little side street that ran parallel to a row of backyards. There weren't any streetlights, and the houses didn't have back porch lights either. It was all shadows. I remember slowing down and double-checking the house number because it looked totally dead. No lights inside, no cars in the driveway. Just this sagging backyard with overgrown grass and a rickety wooden fence that didn't even close all the way. Still, I followed the instructions. I parked on the gravel shoulder, grabbed the pizza, and walked up the incline toward the back door, holding the pizza in one hand and my flashlight in the other, angling it down toward my feet so I wouldn't trip on anything. When I got to the top of the hill, I saw the back door. It was one of those old white ones with a small pane of glass at the top covered by a cheap curtain. I knocked and waited, but no one answered. I knocked a second time, knowing my manager would be livid if I returned to the store empty-handed. After no response, I was about to knock a third time when I saw the curtain move. Not a lot, just this tiny little twitch, like someone brushed it with their finger. It was quick, and I don't think I would have even noticed if I hadn't been staring at the glass. I stood there for another few seconds, expecting the person who was clearly standing right behind the door to finally open up. But before that happened, I noticed two unmarked cars pull up to the side street behind my car. My first thought was that I was about to get in trouble for trespassing or something. One of the car doors opened and someone stepped out. Even from the house, I could make out that it was a man in the light of the other car's headlights. The guy motioned for me to walk over to him, which I did, assuming he had ordered the pizza and I had just beaten him home from work or something. But as I got closer, I realized he was flashing me something in his hand. It was a badge. The guy was an undercover police officer, which I could tell because he wasn't wearing a uniform, just normal clothes. As soon as I got close enough, he told me to head back to my car and wait there. That was it. That's all he said. So I did. I backed away slowly, climbed into the delivery car, and sat there watching. That's when I realized there weren't just two officers. There were 5, maybe more. All of them had flashlights, but none of them said a word. They moved quietly, circling the house like they were trying not to be seen. Not one of them knocked or announced their presence, which I found strange. It was a bizarre sight. I remember one of the officers reaching for the back door handle, the same one I had just knocked on, and gently trying it. When it didn't open, he just nodded at one of the others and backed off. It felt like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to see, and I guess I was. Eventually, the first officer came back to my car and crouched beside the window. I rolled it down, and he looked over at the pizza box on the passenger seat and let out a short sigh. He was vague about what he told me, but he didn't seem like a jerk, just someone trying not to say too much. Basically, he said there was an ongoing investigation involving that property and that he, along with the rest of the officers, were staking it out. He apologized for taking so long to intervene and told me I had shown up right when they were repositioning their vehicles. I asked if he wanted to see the delivery order and he nodded. I pulled it up on the delivery app, but I could tell it was useless. There was a phone number with the order, along with the delivery address and the first name, Jerry, but it didn't seem particularly helpful. The officer read it, took the number down, then told me to leave immediately. I expressed my frustration, saying my boss was going to kill me for coming back with the pizza, and the guy just shrugged. Then he repeated his instruction for me to leave and started walking away from the car. I was pissed, but there was nothing I could do, so I drove off. It took the entire ride back for the whole thing to sink in. I didn't really grasp the gravity of the situation until I stepped out of the car. If the police hadn't intervened when they did, something awful could have happened. I don't even know what. The more I thought about it, the more I realized the presence of the police was probably the only reason the person didn't open the door to accept the pizza. But why would someone order a pizza if they were being staked out? Maybe the person inside didn't know they were being watched. Or maybe they did, and I was part of some test run. Like maybe I was the bait to see if the cops were watching that side of the house, or if they'd moved. The curtain moving, the silence, the timing. I don't know. What I do know is that I'll never get an explanation for what happened, and thinking back on it is mostly a waste of time. I probably would have forgotten about it completely if one of my high school friends hadn't brought it up the other week. I didn't even remember it at first. It's probably best I forget about it again, but I figured I'd share it here before that happens. The abandoned school incident. This is a story I haven't thought about in a long time, and for good reason. My friends and I used to love exploring things. Growing up in New Jersey, There were enough abandoned places within driving distance to keep us entertained for hours. A lot of the stuff we did wasn't all that cool in hindsight. Just decaying buildings, empty warehouses, stuff like that. But every now and then, we'd stumble across something more interesting. One place that had been on our radar for a while was an abandoned middle school about a 30-minute drive away. I won't say the name here for privacy reasons, but anyone familiar with North Jersey urban exploring probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. We'd seen photos of the place online and figured it was finally time to check it out. It was late summer, and we were getting bored of our usual activities, which mostly consisted of playing basketball in my backyard and driving around aimlessly. I can't remember who brought up the idea, but it was a pretty spontaneous thing. There were 4 of us that night: me, Yuri, Frank, and Freddie. Frank and I were into graffiti, so we brought a few cans of black and white spray paint. Beyond that, the rest of my bag was filled with some Roman candles I had left over from the 4th of July. Our MO with these kinds of things was always the same. We'd mess around inside, get to the roof, shoot some fireworks off, then sprint down before any cops rolled up. This evening would be no different. Yuri was driving that night. He pulled onto a side street a few blocks from the school, and we got out. We made our way toward the school and were pleasantly surprised to see that the fence around the perimeter had been cut. We were prepared to jump, but I was glad we wouldn't have to. The school was huge, bigger than the pictures online had led us to believe. It would have taken forever to explore the whole thing, but that was a good thing, since the 4 of us were prone to getting bored quickly. Frank led the way through the hall, followed by Yuri, then me, and finally Freddie, who was the most fearless and volunteered to bring up the rear. We found a door that wasn't boarded up and stepped inside. Even with our flashlights, it was eerie. Picture your childhood school, only dead silent. Every hallway was stripped down to exposed wires and crumbling tile. Insulation hung from the ceiling, and bits of broken furniture were scattered everywhere. The entrance we found opened into a hallway, which we started walking through after clicking on our flashlights. We all had really powerful flashlights, something we were oddly proud of for whatever reason. When I say powerful, I mean it. Mine cost $60 and could illuminate an entire room with a beam strong enough to blind you for a few seconds if you glanced at it. It was a lot of money for a flashlight, but I thought it was worth it. The walls were coated in graffiti, some of it good, some of it awful. Frank and I paused here and there to check out a few tags, but mostly we kept moving. I'll spare you most of the details about the building itself, but it was honestly really cool. Seeing all those old seats and a stage that was literally falling apart was an amazing sight. We made a quick loop through the basement, which was by far the most rundown part of the school. We didn't spend much time down there, partly because of how unstable it looked, but mostly because I could tell my friends were getting creeped out. One of the rooms had a massive pentagram painted on the floor, which wasn't exactly a comforting sight. Creepy, yeah, but not unusual. Anyone who's done urban exploring knows these pop up everywhere. We didn't linger. The 4 of us eventually made our way to the 2nd floor. One of the classrooms had a completely untouched white wall, basically a blank canvas. Frank and I grinned and started throwing paint up, while Yuri and Freddie said they were going to keep exploring and look for a way to the roof. They disappeared down one of the dark hallways while we stayed back tagging. Once we wrapped up our piece, Frank wanted to keep working on another section of the wall. I wandered out of the room to check out some of the better artwork along the nearby corridors. After about 5 minutes of just standing there admiring the art, I heard Frank yell out from behind me. He sounded angry and asked if I was messing with him. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, and he told me to quit the act, still angry. Before I could figure out what he meant, he said, "I know you took my bag." I swore I didn't do anything, that I'd been standing in the hallway the entire time. He believed me after a moment and muttered something about how it must have been Freddie. To be fair, it was the type of thing Freddie had a tendency to do. We searched the room with our lights just to be safe, but there was nothing. The bag was gone. We couldn't do much more tagging without it since it had all the unused paint. So we decided to go find the guys, assuming they were on the roof by then. We went as far up as the stairs would take us, but they didn't lead to the roof. We wandered the floor aimlessly, checking various rooms for any access point. At one point, I walked into a small side room and froze. There on the wall was another pentagram, like the one we'd seen in the basement, only this one looked much more ominous. It was freshly painted. I could tell because the paint was still dripping down the wall, and in the corner of the room was Frank's bag, just sitting there. Frank stepped in behind me and immediately saw what I was looking at. Without missing a beat, he grabbed his bag off the floor and said, in a pretty loud voice, "What the hell is wrong with him?" I didn't respond. Even as a joke, it seemed like something that crossed the line a little too much, even for Freddy. We left the room and started walking down a random hallway in silence, just wanting to find our friends. Then, all of a sudden, we heard rapid footsteps pounding toward us. It was Freddy and Yuri, who motioned frantically for us to follow them. We didn't even have time to be mad at Freddy, we just ran. Here's a good rule to live by. If someone tells you to run, you don't stand around asking questions. That's just plain stupid. As we ran, Yuri tried to explain what was going on, but I couldn't make out much over the noise. All I gathered was that we were running from someone, most likely multiple people. The four of us tried to find our way back to the exit, but the building was a literal maze, especially in the dark. Eventually, we stopped to catch our breath at a corner in what felt like a completely different wing of the school. We all agreed that if we just found a random stairwell and went down, we'd eventually find a way out. It didn't sound like anyone was chasing us anymore, so we decided to move quietly and carefully. After a few minutes, we found a stairwell and went down a couple of floors. Once we got to what we agreed was the ground level, we started walking through the hallway, thinking we were in the clear. But just then, this sharp hissing noise rang out from somewhere ahead of us, a steady, cutting hiss. That's the best way I can describe it. It sounded like someone trying to imitate a cat. The four of us froze, praying whoever was down there hadn't noticed us. But as we slowly and quietly started retreating back the way we'd come, a deep voice spoke from beyond the darkness in front of us. He said, word for word, "I should have cut you when I had the chance." We didn't wait another second. We just ran. This time I could actually hear several sets of footsteps behind us, which made everything 10 times scarier than before. They were yelling obscene things, threats about how they were going to kill us and how they had all the exits covered. It was the scariest moment of my life. I thought we were going to have to run back upstairs and hide somewhere in the building, but somehow Yuri took a turn at exactly the right moment, and up ahead we saw the original door we'd come through. We didn't slow down. We bolted straight through it, out of the building, across the yard, through the fence, and all the way back to Yuri's car. We jumped in, slammed the doors, and Yuri hit the gas. Even as we looked back toward the school, the darkness made it impossible to see anything clearly, but we weren't about to stick around to find out. As we sped away, Freddy started telling us their side of the story. He said that after failing to find a way to the roof, he and Yuri had gone down a floor to look for us. That's when Freddy started hearing weird metallic clinking coming from one of the rooms. He thought it was us messing around, so they went to check it out. When they walked in, they saw 3 cloaked figures sitting in a circle, hunched over something on the floor. According to Freddy, it looked like they were playing some kind of game with glass marbles or stones. As soon as the figures noticed them, they scrambled to their feet and started chasing them. Yuri and Freddy ran back up to the 4th floor, trying to lose whoever was after them, which is where they found us. There were so many things that didn't make sense, though. The most obvious question, the one that stuck in my mind, was why would they mess with us by taking Frank's bag if they really had hostile intentions? Freddy's theory was that whoever was in there thought we'd never be able to find our way out, so they figured they'd toy with us first. Yuri thought that the room with the pentagram was where they were going to kill us, or sacrifice us, or something out of some weird cult ritual. I wasn't so sure. I was pretty convinced they hadn't been chasing us at all, that they'd gone downstairs to cut us off when we eventually made it there. And there was another thing. There had to have been at least 4 people in the building, since one of them had been messing with us upstairs and Yuri and Freddy had stumbled upon 3 more. It just didn't add up. I know it might not sound that scary when I explain it like this, but trust me, if you had been there, you would have been terrified. We never went back, but as far as I know, that building still stands to this day. The House and the Imposter Delivery Man. This happened a little over 5 years ago. I had just moved into my first home, which I no longer live in. At the time, I was coming off a long stretch in a cramped downtown apartment in Spokane. It was a convenient location, sure, but I'd grown tired of the constant traffic noise, the crowded sidewalks, and the feeling that I could hear my neighbors breathing through the walls. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I was ready for something quieter. The place I ended up renting was a small 1-story home on the outskirts of a rural town, tucked behind a stretch of pine trees with a narrow gravel driveway. There's really not much else to say about it, because it wasn't much to begin with. Just 2 small bedrooms, an outdated kitchen, and a cramped bathroom. But it was peaceful. The nearest neighbors were a little ways down the street, out of eyeshot and definitely out of earshot. Finding a job out there was the most frustrating part, but I eventually landed one. Between the long hours and the general exhaustion, I didn't have much of a routine. I mostly lived off takeout and kept to myself. No social life to speak of, which I didn't mind. This particular night happened in late October. I had just gotten home from work, maybe around 9:45 or so. It had been a long day, one of those mentally draining kinds of shifts where all you want is food and a quiet place to sit. I kicked off my boots, changed my clothes, and ordered Chinese from a spot I'd used a few times before. There weren't any delivery apps that serviced that area, so your options for food were pretty limited and depended purely on which places were willing to drive out to you. It was sometime just after 10 when the doorbell rang. I remember thinking, damn, that was fast. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. There was a guy standing there wearing a hoodie and jeans with his hands in his pockets. But he didn't have any food with him. No bag, no receipt, nothing that even remotely screamed delivery driver. I should have caught on sooner, but my brain was running on low power and I just wasn't thinking straight. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door slightly open, keeping the chain on. I asked if he was there with the food. He paused for a couple of seconds, then nodded and said something about wanting to double-check the order before grabbing it from his car. That's when I finally came to my senses. I told him flat out that if he didn't bring the food to the door, I was going to call the police. Instead of responding, he muttered something under his breath, turned around, and walked down the driveway. I watched him until he disappeared into the darkness, the whole time debating whether or not I should say something. I decided against calling anyone else, which I still think was the smart thing to do. Either way, my gut was churning at that point. I shut the door, locked it, and grabbed my phone to call the restaurant. The manager picked up, and after I explained what had just happened, he told me the food hadn't even left yet. That was the moment it really clicked. Whoever had just been at my front door wasn't a delivery driver at all. He was some stranger with the intention of robbing me or doing something even worse. I called the non-emergency police line and reported what happened. The dispatcher advised me to stay alert and said they'd note it for patrol. It wasn't urgent enough for a full response, but they logged it, which I figured was fair since nothing actually happened and, in all likelihood, the guy had probably just left. 20 minutes later, the real delivery driver showed up. I took the food, paid him, and that was that. Around 11:30, I was sitting in the living room watching TV with the lights off when I heard a noise. A faint scraping sound coming from the back of the house. I muted the TV and froze, trying to stay completely silent. After a few agonizing seconds, I heard it again. The scraping was coming from the back door. I stared toward it, my heart pounding, and then the doorknob jiggled slightly. Someone was testing it. Without another thought, I quietly called 911 and whispered what was happening. I grabbed a kitchen knife and locked myself in my bedroom, still trying not to make a sound. About 15 minutes later, I heard an officer announce himself at the front door, and I rushed to let him in. The police searched the property and the surrounding area, but found no one. Despite that, one of them pointed out something near the back door, fresh pry marks. It looked like someone had tried to wedge something under the lock, probably a flathead screwdriver or some kind of pocket tool. I gave them my statement and told them about the earlier encounter. They said patrols would be increased for a while, but other than that, there wasn't much they could do. As much as that frustrated me, I had no choice but to accept it and move on. I'd be lying if I said I slept soundly after that, but the next few nights passed without incident. I told myself there was no way that guy would come back after getting the police called on him twice, and he didn't. But a few nights later, I woke up sometime after midnight to sirens in the distance. They weren't close, but loud enough to rattle me awake. I got up and went to the window just in time to see 3 cruisers flying past my house with their lights flashing. I was relieved it had nothing to do with me, though I couldn't help being curious. I figured it was probably some unrelated domestic call and went back to bed. But not 20 minutes after I'd fallen asleep again, I woke up to knocking at my front door, groggy and half asleep. I walked over and looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers were standing on my porch. When I opened the door, one of them asked if I recognized someone they'd just detained a few streets over. He held up his phone and showed me a photo. It was him, the man from a few nights earlier, the one who'd tried to break into my house. I confirmed it immediately, still in shock. The officers explained that he'd just been caught trying to break into another home nearby. They had him in custody and wanted to confirm the connection to my earlier call. One of them told me I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. I thanked them, and that was the last I ever heard about it. They never followed up, and I never inquired. I was just happy to move on and forget the whole thing. I ended up moving out of that house not long after, mostly because the isolation had started driving me crazy. The man in the walls. This happened just last year. I'm 40 now, married with 2 boys, ages 7 and 5. I work in insurance, which sounds boring because it is, but we're stable, and that's all I really care about at this point in life. A couple of years ago, my dad passed away after a long fight with cancer. He left behind a beach house down in Delaware that I had never been to before because he used to rent it out year-round. It's nothing fancy or big, but it's in a fantastic spot, just 1 block off the boardwalk. My favorite part about it by far is the upstairs back deck that gives a really nice view of the ocean. We started going there every summer after he passed, using it as our escape. A week here, a week there. It became our little family tradition. As much as my wife and I love spending time there, the boys love it even more. They'll spend hours playing on the beach, riding bikes, and exploring the town. It feels like a gift, something my dad left behind for us to enjoy. This story takes place during one of those weeks last summer. We'd gone down in mid-July, a Sunday through Friday kind of trip, when the crowds would thin out mid-week and the beach felt a little quieter. I remember the night clearly. It was a Wednesday. The boys had knocked out around 9:30 after a long day in the sun, and my wife and I were sitting on the back deck, playing cards and sipping wine. That's when our older son, Jordan, came outside. He had this uneasy look on his face. He told me he kept hearing a scratching noise in his room, and it was keeping him awake. I glanced at my wife, set my glass down, and stood up, telling him I'd go check it out. I told my wife to hang tight. I figured it was probably just some generic house noise. It's a pretty old house after all. The boys don't share a room, so I didn't see any need to wake our younger one. I followed Jordan downstairs to his room, and he pointed to the wall near his bed and motioned for me to be quiet. We both stood there for a while, and at first, I didn't hear anything. But I didn't want him to think I didn't believe him, so I waited a bit longer. After maybe 20 seconds, I finally heard it. Faint at first, but definitely there. A soft scratching sound, just like he described. I crouched down and pressed my ear to the wall. It didn't sound like an animal up in the rafters or anything. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall, lower down, closer to the baseboards. That's when I heard it, breathing. Not an animal. Definitely not. It was deep, slow, human breathing. I flinched back and let out a sharp, "Jesus crap," without even meaning to. And then, I'm not kidding about this, I heard the most guttural, angry scream I've ever heard in my life, ringing out from somewhere inside the wall. It caught me so off guard that I yelled again, a wave of pure dread crashing through me. I grabbed Jordan by the arm and yanked him out of the room. We ran down the hall to get my younger son, Scott, who was still sound asleep. I didn't even give him a chance to wake up. I just scooped him into my arms and ran. The only thought in my head was getting back upstairs to my wife on the deck. As we reached the base of the stairs, I shouted her name, and then another scream erupted from somewhere behind me, only much closer this time. I turned around and saw a man, covered in filth, charging down the hallway straight at us. I nearly tripped trying to get up the stairs with both my sons, but we made it upstairs and onto the deck just in time. Not 2 seconds after I slammed the sliding door shut, the guy hit the glass full force. I genuinely thought it was going to shatter. He started clawing at the door like an animal, shrieking and pounding, yelling things I can't even bring myself to repeat. I threw my body against the door and yelled at my wife to grab the kids and call the police. She pulled them back, covering their ears, trying to keep them away from the sight of what was happening. I kept my eyes locked on his, doing everything I could to block him from their view. He was wild, completely unhinged. His hand smeared something across the glass. Dirt, blood, I don't even know. He dragged it down the surface as he kept slamming and yanking at the handle, trying to force his way in. I don't know how long I held that door shut. A minute, 5, it felt like forever. He had this inhuman energy, and it took every bit of strength I had to keep him out. He didn't stop once. All I could think about was protecting my family. I was fully prepared to fight him if the glass gave way. But before that could happen, the police finally arrived. They must have come around the side of the house because within seconds I saw 2 officers rushing through the living room toward the man still pounding on the glass. One tackled him from behind, and the other helped pin him down. The rest of the night was a blur. Once they got him out of the house and into the back of a police car, the officers took my statement. Then we walked through the house together, trying to figure out how that man had been inside the walls and how he'd gotten out so fast. Turns out, the house has a crawl space I didn't even know existed. There's a hidden entrance underneath the back porch, completely out of sight unless you're specifically looking for it. From there, it leads into a standing crawl space that runs alongside the foundation and connects to the interior through a loose panel inside Jordan's closet. I had no idea it was there. I'd never done a full inspection of the place after inheriting it. Hell, I hadn't even refinished it. A few days later, a detective called to follow up and gave me more information. The man had confessed. He'd been living in that crawl space for months. He found the entrance during the off-season and had been hiding there ever since. That night, he said he planned to harm my family for intruding on what he called his new home. Apparently, he'd been stealing food from our house, which we somehow never noticed, and rummaging through our neighbors' trash bins. We didn't go back for the rest of the summer, not out of fear something else might happen, but because of the trauma. I couldn't bring myself to take my wife or kids back there, and they didn't object. I hired a crew to seal off the crawl space completely, and once that was done, I finally started to feel like I could breathe again. We've been using the house again this summer, and I'm glad to say things are back to normal, or at least as close to normal as they'll ever get. Catherine's bar encounter. This happened just a few weeks ago, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. My name's Catherine, and I'm a 24-year-old law student about to start my second year at NYU. For anyone unfamiliar, first year is a nightmare. I don't think I slept more than 4 hours a night from September to May, so when summer finally rolled around, I promised myself I'd enjoy it while I could. That meant going out a lot, especially on weekends. I was staying back home for the summer for a couple of reasons. It was cheaper on rent, and all my hometown friends were around too. Plus, there's a certain kind of comfort that only comes from being home, that sense of familiarity and return. Most Saturdays, my friends and I ended up at the same handful of bars a couple towns over. There's one in particular that's always packed, and that's where I was with my friend Jackie the night everything went down. This is going to sound bad, but I have this habit of pretending to be a little ditzy when I meet guys at bars. Nothing extreme, just enough to let them make assumptions, and make assumptions they do. I'm not sure if this has always been a thing, but the guys I meet in bars seem to think every girl they talk to is brain dead. I'm not a genius, but I'm definitely not stupid, and somehow pretending to be dumb is kind of fun. I can't even really explain why I do it. Maybe it's because I like watching how people react, and I'll admit, there's something satisfying about flipping the script once I get bored of the act. Jackie and I had just gotten our drinks and were scanning the crowd when two guys approached us. We later learned their names were Sebastian and Luke. They seemed normal, not creepy, decent looking, confident, and no immediate red flags, which is always a relief. Jackie seemed to click with Luke right away, so I figured I'd stick around and talk to Sebastian. He wasn't bad. Kind of charming, actually. We talked for a surprisingly long time, which was rare because most bar conversations barely last 5 minutes. Jackie's not exactly what you'd call a patient conversationalist, so the fact that she wasn't rolling her eyes or walking off was saying something. At one point, she leaned over and whispered that she needed the bathroom. As we got up, Sebastian asked if we wanted another round. I told him we'd both take rum and cokes, a safe, simple order, hard to mess up. In the bathroom, Jackie told me she was thinking about going home with Luke, preferably soon. I was honestly shocked. Usually I'm the one making impulsive, questionable decisions, not her. I asked what had gotten into her, and she tried to convince me that Luke could be the one, which made me want to laugh, but I held it in. Instead, I shrugged. I wasn't particularly invested either way, but I figured if she was into it, I'd just go along. When we came out of the bathroom, I spotted the guys across the bar. They hadn't noticed us yet. Something about them looked different, though. They weren't laughing or chatting like before. They were just standing there, faces blank. And the closer I looked, the more it seemed like they were whispering to each other. That subtle change sent a weird, uneasy feeling through me. But as soon as we got close enough, they both snapped back into their casual, friendly demeanor, like nothing had changed. Luke slid 2 drinks toward us without saying a word. I looked down. There were 4 drinks total, 2 rum and cokes and 2 something elses. I couldn't really tell what the other drinks were, but based on the bright yellow color and slushy texture, one thing was clear. They definitely didn't look like something most guys would order. I decided to use that to my advantage. With as innocent a smile as I could manage, I pointed at the strange drinks and asked what they were. Sebastian said they were piña coladas, which was beyond random. I tilted my head, gave him a teasing look, and said in a playful voice, "You know, I think these drinks might be too girly for you guys. I'd hate for anyone to catch you sipping them." Before waiting for a reaction, I slid our rum and cokes across the table and replaced them with the frozen drinks. Then I raised my glass, took a long, slow sip, and gave Sebastian a little wink. Jackie caught on and grabbed the drink I pushed toward her. She looked at me, clearly confused, but went with it. Sebastian stared at me for a long second, his eyes narrowing like he was sizing me up. Then he smirked and said, "Touché." He started sipping the rum and coke, and that, honestly, made me relax a little. Luke followed his lead. We finished the drinks without incident. At that point, Jackie was being pretty obvious that she wouldn't mind leaving soon, and Luke eventually picked up on it, suggesting that we all go back to his place for a nightcap. That's when I started to feel like everything was normal again. I figured if they were inviting us over, they couldn't suspect we knew anything. We Ubered to his apartment, which was nothing special, just a modest second-floor unit in a small complex nearby. Inside, it was cleaner than I expected, but weirdly minimal, like he'd just moved in. Luke grabbed some White Claws from the fridge and put on some music. Everything seemed normal at first. No red flags, no weird vibes. In fact, it almost felt like they were starting to sober up. But that didn't last long. We couldn't have been there more than 20 minutes before things got strange again. The guys started getting drunker, fast. Their words slurred, their laughs got sloppy, and then, just like that, they both passed out on the couch within minutes of each other. It was horrifying. My suspicion that they'd messed with our drinks was suddenly proven right in front of us. Jackie, drunker than me, didn't fully understand what was happening at first. She ran over to Luke and tried to shake him awake, but I pulled her back and told her to calm down. I reminded her that I'd switched the drinks, that they might have been drugged, and that what we were seeing was proof of it. Her eyes went wide, and she just kept saying, "Oh my God," over and over again. We sat there for a few minutes, frozen, trying to calm down and figure out what to do next. I wanted to leave immediately, but Jackie insisted on finding proof, something incriminating. We looked around a bit, but it's not like we were detectives, and what exactly were we supposed to look for? We weren't about to tear the place apart. I told her that and eventually convinced her to drop it. We left not long after that. I think we were both in shock. We never went to the police, not that night or the next morning, and at this point, we probably never will. I know that sounds irresponsible, but we didn't have any real evidence that they did anything illegal. There's always a chance they just got too drunk too fast, though I doubt it, and so does Jackie. Either way, I don't think I've ever been closer to real danger. Why anyone would drug girls who were already willing to go home with them is beyond me. It makes me think they were planning something worse, something that wouldn't have had a happy ending. What confuses me most is why they'd let us come over at all if they knew they were about to pass out. Maybe they thought the drugs wouldn't affect them because of their size, but that still doesn't make sense. Why even take that risk? I really can't explain any of it. It's something I'm going to think about for a long time. I know it was stupid to let someone else handle my drink, but it's terrifying to realize how far some people will go to get what they want. The summer disappearance. I grew up in a kind of rural area where you could ride your bike for miles without seeing another person. Like a lot of people, my favorite season was always summer. It still is, actually, but it's been a while since I lived out in the country, so summer's lost a little bit of its magic. A lot of what made it special was tied to life in the middle of nowhere. Something about the warmth, the quiet, the emptiness that felt peaceful instead of lonely. It's hard to explain, but I always loved that feeling of isolation. Like I had my own little corner of the earth, a place where I could disappear for hours and no one would know. Summer nights were the best. The darkness made the world feel private, hidden, and free in a way that the 16-year-old me craved. I had a friend back then named Taylor. She was bolder than me, a little reckless, always the one pushing boundaries in small but thrilling ways. One random night in July, we decided to go stargazing, just us, 2 bikes, and a bottle of wine. It wasn't our first time doing something like that. In fact, it was kind of our thing. That is, until the night I'm about to tell you about. Come to think of it, it was probably the last time we ever went stargazing together. We didn't have much of a plan, just a direction. Taylor said she knew a good spot past the edge of town. Some abandoned farmland where nobody ever went. It sounded perfect. We left around 10 o'clock and biked for maybe 20 or 30 minutes, pedaling past houses, past lights, until we reached the middle of nowhere. At some point, Taylor stopped abruptly, put her foot down and said, "We're here." I didn't really know what here meant, because there was nothing around. No buildings, no fences, no lights. But it did feel perfect. Just open fields and a huge, endless sky full of stars. We spread out a blanket and opened the wine bottle with the little corkscrew Taylor had somehow remembered to bring. It was cheap red wine that didn't taste great, but we didn't care. We passed it back and forth, pointing out constellations we could barely remember by name, laughing when we got them wrong. Our tradition was always the same. Try to spot a shooting star. Taylor asked if I thought we'd see one, and I said probably not, but to keep looking anyway. Out in the country, they're not rare, but you still have to be lucky enough to catch one. Shooting star or not, it was a perfect night. The wine was working its magic, the air was warm, and time felt suspended. The world was so still it felt like it belonged only to us. There's something else about that night that's not really relevant to the story, but it's burned into my memory. There was a moment, a small one, like a flicker, where the mood shifted. We were leaning back, and Taylor looked at me in this way that made me wonder if she wanted something more than friendship. I'd always kind of suspected she might, but I never really thought much about it. Still, in that instant, the air between us felt charged. I didn't say anything. That kind of topic wasn't something you talked about openly where we grew up. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was just the wine. Either way, it passed. We laughed about something dumb she said, and just as she turned back toward the sky, a shooting star streaked overhead. If you've ever seen one, you know that instinctive rush you get. You can't help but gasp or laugh or yell something into the night. We both giggled, and Taylor told me to make a wish. I don't remember what mine was. Probably something small and meaningless. But for a moment, everything felt light again. We lay back on the blanket, tipsy and content, talking softly about nothing important. Eventually, I closed my eyes, not to sleep, just to feel the breeze on my face, to sink deeper into the quiet. The air smelled like grass and summer heat, and for a fleeting second, it felt like the whole world had stopped just for us. I swear on my life my eyes weren't closed for more than 5 seconds, but when I opened them, Taylor was gone. Like, gone. Not just off to pee or scrolling her phone. She was actually gone. Her bike was gone too. Mine was still sitting right next to the blanket, exactly where I'd left it. But hers had vanished. I sat up fast, spinning around, thinking maybe she was messing with me, hiding somewhere in the tall grass. But after turning a full 360, I couldn't see her anywhere. That's when this wave of fear hit me. Sharp, sudden, and completely unexplainable. The wide open field that had felt so peaceful minutes earlier suddenly felt suffocating, like the air had thickened. The night sky looked different too. The stars seemed dimmer, like someone had turned the brightness down or smeared something dark across them. And the air, it felt cold in a way that didn't make sense. Not the kind of coolness that comes with a breeze, but something unnatural, like the warmth had been sucked out of the world. I pulled out my phone, maybe as a way to ground myself. The time on the screen made my stomach drop. 3 a.m. exactly. That number is burned into my brain. It couldn't be right. It hadn't even been midnight when I closed my eyes. I blinked a few times, half expecting the time to change, but it didn't. Had I fallen asleep without realizing it? No, that didn't feel right. And even if I had, would Taylor really have ditched me there alone in the middle of nowhere? Not a chance. She wouldn't have done that in a million years. I stood up and shouted her name, once, twice, over and over again, louder each time. No answer. My voice just echoed out across the field, empty and useless. I tried calling her phone, no response. Texted her, nothing. I remember standing there crying, completely helpless, because what else could I do? I finally grabbed my bike and started pedaling home. That ride was the longest, scariest ride of my life. Every sound made me flinch. The wind in the grass, the creak of my bike chain, even my own breathing. I didn't stop until I reached my driveway, drenched in sweat and shaking. I went straight inside, locked the door, and collapsed into bed. The next morning, I texted Taylor as soon as I woke up, expecting some kind of explanation, or at least an apology. But instead, she demanded one from me. Her first message read, "Where the hell did you go last night?" I just stared at my screen for a few seconds before typing back what I remembered. How I'd woken up alone at 3 a.m. and thought she'd left me. But her reply made my blood run cold. She said she was the one who woke up alone at 3 a.m. and I was the one who was gone. She said she waited over an hour before finally giving up and biking home, angry and confused, assuming I'd left her. According to her, I had vanished. According to me, she had. We went back and forth for hours trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. Neither of us had memory gaps beyond that moment. Neither of us had calls or texts that could back up what we swore we remembered. even though we both distinctly remembered calling each other after waking up. None of those missed calls appeared in our phone logs. Eventually, we stopped talking about it. Officially, we dropped it. But deep down, I know we were both terrified. For months, I'd find myself lying awake, staring out the window at the stars, replaying that night in my head. Taylor and I went stargazing once or twice more after that, but it was never the same. Something between us had changed. Life went on, sure, but even now, I still have no explanation for what happened. I've told this story to a few people over the years, and almost all of them say the same thing, that it had to be something supernatural. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was something beyond what I can understand. I don't like thinking about that possibility, though. The more logical part of me sometimes wonders if she just lied, that maybe she really did leave me there for some reason she never wanted to admit. But then I remember the fear in her voice that next morning, how genuinely confused she sounded, and I know she was telling the truth. I don't know what happened to us that night in that field, and I probably never will. I haven't spoken to Taylor in years, but I'd bet anything that she still lies awake sometimes, staring up at the night sky, wondering the same thing I do. What exactly happened to us under those stars, on that summer night that should have been like any other?